Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you for sticking around for your last session of Career Camp today. You have two presenters in this session, so we're just going to start by introducing ourselves, and then we'll go through some information regarding professional etiquette in the workplace with you. My name is Jamie Fry. I'm the Director of Career Development at the Terre Haute campus at Ivy Tech. I've been with the college for just barely 19 years. I just had my 19th anniversary a couple weeks ago here. So I've worked in a couple of different departments, but I've been in the career development office for about 10 years.
Okay, and I am Daryl Decker, and I am the career coach on the Richmond campus. And contrary to popular belief, I've been with the college since 2005, and that's started out as an adjunct instructor and kind of worked my way around different positions. I've been with career development now for the last 5 years, and prior to this, I was an advisor, and I was also in admissions.
All right. How do I get back? We're just going to talk again today about professional etiquette in the workplace and what that means, what it means to you when you go out and you get a job and you start working. How do you make good impressions on the people around you to be successful in the workplace? And one thing that Daryl and I both want to encourage today is that you chime in and have some discussion with us. We have some forced discussion later in the presentation, but that's not the only time that we want you to feel free to participate. So please feel free to put things in the chat, or just chime in whenever you have a question or a comment or something to add to the conversation, because that's always much more enjoyable for everyone, I think, than just listening to two people talk at you. So please feel free to jump in anytime. So just thinking about what professionalism is, you can see I've defined it here as defined by Webster, just conduct that or qualities that characterize a person as a professional. And so how we behave defines us, right? And that leaves a lasting impression on other people. Displaying professional behavior in the workplace is important. It does lead to success. Displaying unprofessional behavior can kind of get you into some trouble and maybe even cost you a job or your reputation at your job. So we want to just talk to you today about some tips about how to be professional at work, what kinds of things that you should be doing to make a good impression on those around you, and why that's important.
Okay, so I'll take this slide. Throughout the presentation also, we're going to pepper it with certain keywords, like this slide is on being reliable. And so as we talk, we want you to start thinking about your personal brand. Your personal brand is kind of what people think of you when you've left the room. You know, what are they going to say about you? So if you can say that you are a reliable person, or you were a reliable employee, that is something also, it's a soft skill that you can put on a resume. So in the workplace, what do we mean by being reliable? The first bullet point talks about showing up late to work or missing work can look unprofessional, and it can cost you a job, obviously, especially as she points out in the third bullet point about being part of your probationary period. If you have like a 3-month, 6-month type probationary period, when you are first start a job, you are under a microscope. So attendance is super, super important. Now, we do recommend you getting to work at least 10 minutes prior to start, and we'll just say your shift, for lack of a better word.
Grab a seat over there.
And that is simply because, again, as a supervisor or manager, if you see an employer hustling all the time, like right at 8 o'clock, if that's there when they were supposed to start, it's such a negative impression. So get to work on time, early, I should say, and just be prepared. Be prepared to start your work day. So Anybody have any questions on that? Speak up if you want. Okay.
All right. Very good. Yeah. So being on time, just like Daryl said, is one of the things that it's just a really easy way I say easy, I guess it's not always easy to be on time, but I think it is an easy way to make a good impression. Everyone notices that. People notice that you're on time for work and that you're ready to go when your shift or your time that you're supposed to be at work begins. So that's definitely something people notice. Another thing that we have to talk about is staying calm under pressure. We all get stressed out at work. Everyone has situations where they feel a little bit overwhelmed, or they feel like, maybe they're being treated poorly by someone, whether it's a customer or someone that they work with. Those are situations that you can't let yourself get dragged into. Anytime you feel like you have pressure from whatever direction, whether it's feeling like you have too much work to do, or you feel like how you're, being treated isn't the greatest, you've got to rise above that and present yourself in a way that shows that no matter what comes at you, you can stay calm, you stay professional, you stay kind, and you treat everyone that you work with respect, and don't ever let anyone, like I said, kind of drag you into a situation where maybe you lose your cool. If you do start to feel overwhelmed at work, most workplaces, or all workplaces, have break policies. So take a step away from your desk for a few minutes and take a break. If you start to get that overwhelmed feeling, where you're feeling like it's getting to be too much.
Can others please mute while Jamie is talking, please?
Nice to see you.
Good to see you too.
Everybody's masked up, aren't they?
Yeah.
Sir Gina, can you please mute? Thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry about
So yeah, just staying calm under pressure and not letting those overwhelming situations that we all have get to you. And just do remember that everyone gets overwhelmed at work. That's not something that's unusual or not typical. We all have those times and those situations, and we have to learn coping mechanisms and skills to handle that in a way that still presents us, we still present ourselves in a professional manner.
Yeah, and I would like to add something to that, Jamie. So really, that's two things we've talked about that could come up during an interview. Most interviews these days are situational. They'll say, "Tell me about a time you," and so think about times where you were reliable. If you don't have a work history, talk about your attendance at school, college, and for sure, I could almost lay money on it that they're going to ask you to talk about a time where you were calm under pressure. Okay, so again, keep those little scenarios in your back pocket.
Absolutely.
Okay, professional dress. Definitely a hot topic these days, especially since we live in a Zoom world. So I will tell you that when Ivy Tech first went virtual, and we were all having our Zoom meetings, we were all still dressing up like we were at the office, and then things got a little slack, and we all started kind of recognizing that. So now I'm noticing that on Zoom calls, people are starting to look a little more business casual again. So that is, again, that is part of your personal branding, is how do you look on the job? Again, clean, well-groomed, put together. As far as the dress code goes, all right, obviously different workplaces have different cultures and different rules and different standards. All right, so you want to make sure you at least meet the standard, whatever it is, and if possible, maybe a step up, just a notch above. Okay, because I will tell you that people that dress professionally all the time definitely stand out. I mean, you definitely remember them. Okay. Again, we talk about clothes that don't have rips or tears or stains. The reasonable amount of jewelry, tattoos, piercings, again, go by your workplace culture. I do want to add also that be careful using cologne, perfumes, things like that. You may be, if we ever get back to sharing offices with people, you may be in an office with someone who has an allergy, okay? And what you think is just maybe just a little bit of perfume or cologne can really overpower. And that's not what you want to be remembered for. So when it comes to jewelry, the tattoos, the piercings, the colognes, just use, common sense and try to think, is this a professional look? Okay, and again, a suit every day, the people that do that, they do stand out. But I find that, like in my case, if I go to a meeting, I throw a jacket on. Usually have a collared shirt on underneath it, and that works well. But again, look at your work standards and maybe, again, just a notch above that. Okay.
I agree, Daryl. And one thing I would also say is not only are people who dress very professionally every day remembered, people who don't dress professionally are also remembered. So that can make just as much of an impression as, someone who does, and obviously in the opposite direction. So it's important. It is part of the impression that you make. So just do keep that in mind. And one thing that I think we all probably have been guilty of is looking at maybe what our coworkers are wearing and, thinking, oh, just because so-and-so is kind of being casual, that maybe means I can. And really, like Daryl was saying, it's important that you adhere to your company policies, regardless of what people around you are doing. You should be, dressing the way that you've been asked to dress by your supervisor or by the organization. We've got just a few examples here for you. With professional dress. Some of them are a little more formal, some of them are casual. And these are just general ideas, to kind of give you an idea of what professional dress looks like. And like I said, some of them are a little more casual than others, but. Any questions from anyone so far about anything that we've talked about before we move on? All right.
Yeah, I have a question too. It does depend on the industry which you're in, right? Obviously, going to a manufacturing interview dressed up in a three-piece suit is going to make you look maybe ridiculous. What's your take on that?
I would say it wouldn't make you ridiculous. I don't know
Okay.
that maybe a three-piece suit might be a little much, but my personal opinion is that being overdressed is better than being underdressed.
Cool.
I think, though, you do absolutely need to think about where you're going. I am a firm believer that even if you're going to an interview where you would wear jeans and a work shirt all day for your job, I think you would still dress like the guy on the left here, still in nice slacks and a button-down shirt, and even maybe a jacket. I think it's a respect thing. That's just how I feel when you're going in for an interview, that you should be dressed above how you would dress at work. But absolutely, I think that's a good point, that you can go a little too far with it. You do have to think about where you're going and think about who your audience is going to be.
And do you have any tips for shoes during interviews? I know some people like to look at socks and shoes.
Yeah, I do have a personal example of that. During a mock interview, we could say, one gentleman was bragging about how much money he made at his previous job, and how and really from the ankles up, the guy looked great, right? And one of the interviewers, again, remember this is a mock interview, right? Called him out. Well, if you made so much money, why are you still wearing such generic kicks? That's what she said. So we don't obviously stress shoes enough, but yeah, make sure they're polished, or they're at least professional or stylish. Don't let that be the one thing, again, that they remember about your wardrobe.
I always went by the rule to dress one level above the position that you're applying for. Is that still pretty valid?
Yeah, and I believe yeah, Jamie said that. Yeah, that's a good rule. Again, you'll be remembered for that.
Jamie, I noticed in the chat.
let your personal preference come into this a little bit and your personal style. You know, you don't have to dress like these people that are in this picture exactly. Just you can put your own spin on things. I think the most important thing is that you're well groomed, that your clothes are clean, that they're ironed, and that they look nice, you know, that you present a general professional manner, that you look like you would be going to a meeting and not maybe to the mall or the beach or whatever. So yeah, but you can absolutely put your own style and your own spin into these things, I think.
Somebody want to check the chat box? I keep seeing the
Yeah, I'll
the
go
numbers.
ahead. I'm happy to facilitate. Sharonda wants to know, what does one level above in dress mean?
So I would say that really kind of means if you're working somewhere where you would be wearing khakis and a polo every day, right? Maybe you would wear to the interview, you would wear a dressier pair of slacks and a button-down shirt versus a suit and tie, because that might be going a little above and beyond. Would you agree, Daryl?
Yeah, that's exactly. I was going to use the polo and khakis example myself.
Okay.
Yeah. Did that help? Whoever asked that question.
And also, somebody mentioned scrubs. I think it was Mary in the chat. One of the things I always tell our students who are going to be wearing scrubs to work is that I have not figured out what one step above scrubs is. I'm still, after all these years, trying to figure out what that might be. So I think maybe you just go, you know, business casual to business professional, like Mary said in the chat, in those situations.
Right, like Carrie on the very right hand of this paper or this picture.
Right.
I think that button-up look with the slacks is classic for men and women.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Moving along here. So our next slide is just about developing positive connections with your colleagues and customers. This is really important. This is something that really can affect you for years and years as you go throughout your career. Someone once told me, be careful how you treat people on the way up, because you don't know you don't know when you'll meet them on the way down. So you never know when someone is going to come into your future that you've worked with in the past. So making positive connections and developing good, strong relationships with everyone you work with is really important. They can have a very significant impact on your future. You don't want to burn any bridges. If someone would have told me, you know, in October of 2001, when I started working here, that I would be working at Ivy Tech Community College 19 years later, I had no plans to do that. So I didn't know that I was still going to be working around some of the same people that I worked around when I was 24 years old. So hopefully I managed to make a good impression on most of those people. But that wasn't something I was thinking about, and it should have been. So, you know, wherever you're working, even if you think this might be a short-term thing, you just never know what it'll turn into. So just making those good impressions is important. Relationships and networks can help you with finding a job years down the road. Again, you don't know who's going to pop up into your future, or who might be sitting across an interview table from you 2 or 3 years from now. Somebody in this session might be, you know, interviewing me in a job for a job in 5 years. You just never know. So that's why it's really important just to use that professional behavior and all the things that we're talking about in all your interactions at work. Treating everyone that you work with in a respectful and kind manner, even if you don't necessarily agree with them. You don't have to be friends with the people that you work with. You can if you want to. Sometimes that makes work a little more fun, but you don't have to go to dinner with the people that you work with. They don't have to be your personal friends, but while you're at work, you have to find a way to work with them as part of the team, regardless of your personal feelings about them. So keeping keeping that in mind. And of course, just the obvious, staying away from controversial topics at work is important. We're living in a very controversial world right now. So I know those things come up, but staying away from those topics with your colleagues and at work is, I think, important, especially in today's world. And of course, be careful with jokes. You don't want to do anything that make a joke that might be offensive or hurt someone else's feelings. So making sure that you're cognizant of that. And another thing I think is important is admitting your mistakes. That's a really humble thing to do. I think we all make mistakes at work. Every one of us does. We make mistakes in our personal life. And it's really, really hard to work around someone who never wants to take responsibility for a mistake that they made. So if you make a mistake, say, hey, I made a mistake. I'm sorry. What can I do better? How can I fix it next time? So just being, again, willing to admit when you make a mistake and learn from it and move on. Keeping relationships professional at work is important. It's certainly, again, okay to have friends at work, but this can be kind of a slippery slope. So just use caution and be careful with those kind of relationships. And of course, you'll always want to adhere to your company policy regarding that sort of thing. So
I would like to emphasize actually those last 3 bullet points. Jokes that may have been funny 10 or 15 years ago, or at least that you thought were funny, they're not funny. All right. So, err on the side of caution with that. And admit your mistakes. That is especially crucial if you are in a leadership position. I would take a bullet for a supervisor or a director or whatever that would come to me and say, Daryl, I messed up. I was like, that's okay. Because what I won't do is follow someone who acts like, they're not, they weren't responsible for that particular mistake. So if you are in a leadership position, it's okay to admit your mistakes. It really does. A little humility can go a long way. And then again, like the last bullet point states about, it's okay to have friends at work, but it needs to be an organic thing. A friendship will grow. Don't try to force one. Okay. I did work for a place where there was no such thing as a Christmas party. They didn't have a Christmas party, right? Everybody liked each other, but it wasn't a thing. And then a particular manager read somewhere that, the employees that partied together stay together and work better together. So the first annual Christmas party became the only annual Christmas party because everybody was simply miserable. So again, be cautious. Don't try to force a friendship that's not there. Just again, let it grow. If it grows out of your working relationship, all the better.
I agree, definitely. And again, I just want to reiterate, remembering that these relationships, you might not see somebody for 5 years after you work with them, but they might pop up five years later, and you might be in a situation where you're working with them again, or you're working for them. So it is very, very important that you develop good relationships and that you make a good impression, and just always put your best foot forward when it comes to this.
Jamie, I'm sorry, I did see one of the chats just pop up asking about a PDF. Did you put the PowerPoint?
I put it in the chat. It should be in the very beginning of the chat.
Okay.
I'll repost it again for those that might have joined later.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I missed it. I must have came in right after you posted it.
Oh yeah, I did it really early on, so totally fine. We can get it posted again for you.
Okay.
This next slide is just pairing complaints with solutions. That's something that I think makes a good impression on your supervisor. Many times supervisors get complaints just about everything. Everyone wants to bring the problems to the boss and say, so-and-so is not doing their work, or this process isn't working, and all these things that are wrong. But I think I think that's okay. That's part of a supervisor's job, is to hear those things, and they know that. But it leaves a much better impression on them if you bring a solution to your problem. So if you've got something going on at work that you feel like, hey, this just isn't working. This is not a good process, or this isn't a good program, and you think it needs to change. Well, how do you want to change it? And what do you want to do about it? How can you make it better? Because bringing the problem to the supervisor without a solution is just sort of dropping it in their lap. And that's not something that they're probably going to appreciate much. So if you can bring a solution with a problem that you're having, then I think it's a good idea to do that. Trying not to complain about your coworkers, which many of us, you often hear the term "stay in your lane." Unless they're having a true negative impact on your performance, just kind of let it go. If a coworker is not doing something up to par to your opinion, or not doing something that you think that they should be doing, but it really doesn't have an impact on you or your job, then I think you just zip it. So again, unless it's having a true negative impact on the organization, or if it's a danger or something like that, that's different. But if they're just getting on your nerves, or just doing something that you think isn't really that cool, then I think just leave it alone.
You're saying don't complain to anybody about it, right?
I mean, I think, I think that goes back to those relationships, and Daryl, chime in here of what you think. But, if you have a friend that you've developed that friendship with, that, you want to talk with after hours about it, maybe. But for the most part, I think if it's, again, and I want to be very clear, if it's not something that's having a true impact on your job or the organization, then it's really not worth complaining, because then it just sounds like a complaint. But if it is something that is having a true negative impact, then I think, again, you have to think about having a conversation with the appropriate person. But again, maybe bringing a solution along with that conversation.
And that second bullet point, I think, is very important. I would say always, your yearly evaluations, if there's a true, and I'm not gonna say conflict, but maybe an area of improvement for you, supervisors do like to hear, how do you think we should solve this? Okay, so again, if you have your own ideas about how you can improve your job, because you don't fit into that cookie cutter expectation, then please, an evaluation is the best time to come up with. Hopefully it's not the first time you've heard that you might not be performing to a certain expectation. But again, any ideas you have on your own, always very helpful, always leaves a positive impression. Okay.
There's just on this slide is just a quote, and I'll give you a second to read that. I won't read it to you because I know you all are capable of doing that yourselves.
Jamie, would you or Daryl, either one, be able to share with us maybe like an example of how this has played out for you personally when you had a complaint needing to bring solutions to the table? Oh, I see you getting excited.
Let me stroke my mustache while I think.
Let me think about that.
I may be able to come back to that.
Yeah, I'd have to think about that. I mean, one thing that I think is, for me, is I tend to frame my displeasure in the way of presenting it, of here's what's going on. I have a couple of ideas. What do you think? It's more getting whoever I'm talking to, getting their opinion about it, rather than just going in and saying, here's the problem. What are you going to do about it? it's what are we going to do about it, right? What can we do about it? So if I don't know the solution, because I don't always know the solution, I have lots of things that happen at work that I don't have the answer to. But if I find myself in that situation, I do feel comfortable talking to my supervisor or my colleagues about whatever it is that's going on and making it more of an interactive, what do you think about this and what can we do together to make it better? And I really can't think of a specific example right now.
I have an extreme example. When I worked in a production atmosphere, there was a very, very talented engineer, and then there was a very, very talented engineer's boss. Okay, both of these gentlemen were very valuable to the operation, but man, they clashed like oil and water. And so the HR manager recognized that we couldn't afford to lose either one. So they were both sent to some type, and I'm going to say sensitivity training for lack of a better word. That's not what it was, but what it was training to help those two figure out their own personalities and how to interact with the other person's personality. So again, that was kind of top down, but it was getting to the point where that engineer was going to walk off the job if something hadn't been done. And simply because, again, luckily that HR director was on the ball, recognized that, couldn't lose either one of them. And of course, they didn't like the training at first, but it ended up being a very successful endeavor. So again, that's the extreme example. That is when it's someone doesn't have a solution to how they can work with somebody.
I just thought of something as you were talking, Daryl. I had a situation. I have another role at Ivy Tech. I work as Director of Disability Support Services here in Terre Haute as well. And statewide, we use a common database to manage our students for case management. And it's a relatively new system, so we're still working on it. And we had kind of a situation around the state where lots of people were coding things differently than each other. And so our reports were fuzzy, they weren't right. They weren't accurate, I should say, just because people were putting things into that system differently when they really meant the same thing. So I went in and looked at the system myself and noticed that I could see why, without going into detail, I could see why that was happening. So, you know, when I went to leadership with that problem, I said, I think this is why it's happening. And if we just make this minor change, then I think everyone will be consistent and it'll work much better. And it did, and it worked out fine. So that was something at first that was frustrating for me because I couldn't figure out why these reports were not coming out how I thought that they really should. And then just diving a little bit deeper, I was able to find a solution and bring that to leadership. So.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next slide I have on here is professional email and internet etiquette. This is even more important now than ever, right? Because this is how we're doing pretty much everything right now, and we don't know how much longer our world is going to be this way. But it's important all the time because we're always using technology. So even if tomorrow everything is back to normal, we still need to be thinking about the impression that we're making when we're using email and doing online meetings and things of that nature. So I just, I think that it's important to consider an online meeting just the same as you would consider, behaving the same in an online meeting, the same as you would behave in a face-to-face meeting. So still using the same professional behavior that you would use if you were in person. Another thing I say is never send an email when you're frustrated. Wait until you've had some time to process. We all sometimes receive information via email and we think, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous and that bothers me or whatever. And you want to pop back with a message, and that's not a good idea. If you're frustrated, take some time, think about what you want to say. And sometimes, you know, you'll think about it for an hour or two and you'll think, well, actually, that's not as silly as I thought it was, after you've had some time to process. Or maybe you read something incorrectly, right? Maybe you read the email that they sent to you wrong. And so your response isn't even necessary. So taking some time when you're a little frustrated before you send an email. You should never type in all caps. Most people know that, but that is, you know, thought of as yelling. And please don't use reply all unless you really, really, really want to reply to all. We've had some Ivy Tech situations with the reply all in the past, and that can get pretty tedious when someone replies all and it goes to literally everyone. And then people start saying, stop replying all, but they reply all to say, stop replying to all.
Right.
So that's always fun. So use professional networking sites for professional reasons only. You guys, have you had a session on LinkedIn? You haven't yet. You're having this, is that tomorrow?
I believe that's
probably-
tomorrow.
Yes, it is.
That's tomorrow at
Probably hear
1.
more about this tomorrow, but when you're on, you know, a professional networking site, I see sometimes people posting personal things on those sites, and I just think it's probably best, you know, to keep that personal stuff for your personal social media, and limit your professional networking professional networking sites to professional information. And of course, remember that most things you post on the internet can be seen just about by anyone, and people will develop an impression of you based on your social media activity. So, you know, just being mindful of that, especially if you're talking about your workplace. I would just avoid that altogether, unless you're going to say, I work at the best place in the universe. That's probably the only thing I would say about your job on the internet. And then again, attending a virtual meeting or interview, same professional standards as you would in person.
I was watching I was listening to a historian talk the other day, and she was talking about how Abraham Lincoln used to, now, believe it or not, guys, there used to be times where the only way we'd communicate with each other was writing a letter. You know, we couldn't pick up the phone or couldn't type or whatever. So imagine the pressure Abraham Lincoln was under, and what he would do would be to handwrite negative letters, lay them on a desk, and then at the end of the day, once he got it out of his system, threw those letters away. Now, every historian in the world would love to read what those letters actually said, but think about this: don't even type an email that you don't want to send. Okay. Don't even have it sitting there on your desktop, because you never know when you're going to hit the wrong button. Okay. So if it makes you feel better, write something down, handwrite it somewhere else. Never, ever, ever put a terse email on your computer. Yeah. Yeah. And then burn it, tear it up, eat it, whatever you have to do. Okay. Again, it does make you feel better. You know, it can be cathartic, but holy smokes, guys, do not put it anywhere where you might actually accidentally send it. And
Yeah,
don't use all caps. Man, that drives me nuts.
Yeah, unless you intend to make a point being silly like Jessica just did. That's funny, you know, she's yelling that, please, just, and then burn it. But yeah, don't use all caps when you're especially frustrated. And I think this, we forget how much of an impression we can make electronically. So I think it's sometimes easy to just fire off an email and then think, I shouldn't have done that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
same rule applies to like Microsoft Teams. You know, I made a mistake the other day of taking a joke too far, and had to personally apply to an employee we call the She-Hulk. It was just, it was a good joke with bad timing. I really wish I hadn't sent that. But so yeah, so be careful with the Microsoft Teams. Remember, those are instantaneous.
Yes. And always look at who you're replying to. And of course, you should never say anything you wouldn't want everyone to see in your email, because, well, you just shouldn't. But if you're sending something, you know, that you think is private to somebody, make for sure that it's actually just going to that person and not to others. So just being mindful of that and watching that too.
Okay, so Sherilyn asks, how do you recover from a bad joke or an event that you wish you didn't participate in?
I think you just own up to it.
You own up to it. You're talking to a guy that does that on a daily basis. So like I said, go. And if you can do it in person, so much better. But yeah, just say, hey, look, I took it too far, you know? So you just gotta own it.
Yeah, and apologize, you know, if you said something wrong or that you shouldn't have said, or even if you fire off again, like that email that you wish you didn't send, owning up to that and saying, hey, I was really frustrated and you caught me at a bad moment and I'm really sorry that I did that. So yeah, and you know, for me, if someone did that to me and they came into my office and apologized or called me up and apologized, I would just be absolutely fine. I would say, oh, that's totally fine. I get it. I understand. And I think 99% of people would, because I think most of us have been in that situation where we've said something we wish we didn't say, or we've typed something we wish we didn't type. So having someone else make that same mistake, I think people are forgiving of that because it's something that we've all done a time or two. So.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So this is kind of our forced discussion time where we're going to have you guys share some stories with us. I'll let you look at these pictures because they're kind of fun that we threw out here for you. You got the first guy who obviously, these are all unprofessional pictures, I'm sure you can tell, are pictures of that kind of behavior. You've got the first gentleman who's clearly either asleep or just totally uninterested in what's going on in the room. And then the second gentleman you can tell is yelling. And then we've got the young lady on the phone when her colleagues look like they need her attention. Same thing below, we've got somebody else on the phone while she's got customers waiting, which if you're a customer, you know, can be one of the most annoying things in the history of things. And then of course, we've got someone asleep at her desk, which is inappropriate. So all of these things are unprofessional behavior, but there's lots of things that happen in a workplace or even in, you know, when you're the customer. So like with you, you know, expecting a certain level of customer service from someone and not getting it. How do those things make you feel and what could you have done differently? So kind of like we talked about some examples for us earlier about solutions. Do any of you have examples about situations you've been in like this and how you felt about it, how you might have handled it differently? And really, this is a broad discussion. So we just want some time for you guys to be able to talk. And one thing I want to stay away from is organization names. We don't really want to get into talking about companies or bad experiences that we've had. You can share those experiences, but let's not, you know, let's not identify who those experiences were with if possible. So anybody have anything to share?
I could share a story.
All right, go ahead.
Yeah, please do.
For the last 10 years, I've been in the automotive sales industry, and I'm kind of transitioning careers at this point. Prior to that, I worked for 10 years in a warehouse, and it was a lot more, I guess you'd say, professional in the warehouse environment than in the auto sales environment. Even just 10 years ago, when I first got into it, it was very male dominated. It wasn't very diverse. And, you know, with a lot of young guys making a lot of money, you know, you just get a lot of inappropriate conversations and jokes and things like that. And like I said, previous to that, I was a department manager in a warehouse, and it was a huge culture shock for me. And, you know, they'd be making sexual oriented jokes or anything like of that nature. And I would just like kind of tense up like, oh, you know, this is a HR meeting waiting to happen. But, you know, sometimes I think back, and I was only like 29 or 30 when I first got into the auto sales industry. And I think, well, a lot of those guys were younger than me in their early 20s. Maybe I could have been a better, team leader or something like that, like a role model. But, it's just really hard, especially when you're the new guy, to kind of like set that example, and you don't want to like ostracize yourself at the same time either. So it was just kind of like I said, like a culture shock, and it was kind of a hard situation to handle. But as time went on and the industry kind of, caught up with most of the other industries in the country and kind of had more of a standard on appropriate workplace, and again, like more females got into the business and were accepted in the business over time, and teams got a lot more diverse. I think that helped a lot too.
That's a great example. It is really hard, I think, to speak up and say, it's easier just to walk away and pretend you don't hear it, right? So yeah, and there's a fine line there, absolutely. So that's a great example.
Yeah, and like you said, Joe, so many industries that were male dominated have really had to face a lot of changes for the better, obviously, for the better.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I was a young supervisor in the same position you were, and in a different state, and the culture was very different from what I was raised in. And I'm not a prude, but man, there's a couple things that were said that shocked me. But again, being a young supervisor, I really didn't step in. Now I wish I would have, sure, but at the end, boy, it's a tough call. It's a very tough call.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I also had an experience one point in time. It's one of those, my name is Rebecca, but I go by Becky. So I'm originally from Kenya, Africa. So I remember the first job that I got into, I wasn't exposed to so much cursing. And that really was like, that's just inappropriate. So that went on for a while. But because I was still new, I had an accent. I just had to say, you know what, guys, I'm not comfortable with that kind of language. It's not what I'm used to, and it's not okay. At first, they retaliated, but then I think when you're very consistent with your stand, it makes a difference, because then anytime they would want to go off, they'd be like, oh, yeah, they caught themselves aware of what they were doing. So I think being an immigrant, sometimes I have to face a lot of things, and I'm like, okay, well, because then you stand there, it's going to affect you and we'll be part of it. But then it reaches a point in time whereby you're like, it's affecting me, so I'd really appreciate if you just wouldn't talk like that. So yes.
I faced an issue too at work. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Where the director was kind of showing favoritism to some of the employees and like saying hateful things about those that weren't her favorites, if you know what I mean. It just made me so uncomfortable, but I had to like walk a fine line on how I spoke about it. And it was, I eventually got out of the education arena because it's so widespread. So yeah, I'm making a career change now, and I hope that the industry I go into will not be that way. But I wondered your thoughts on, what do you do when the bosses are kind of in a position of power and the board backs them up? So,
Gosh, I think that's probably something we could do a whole nother session on. That's a pretty long answer. Those are tough situations to be in. I think communication with your supervisor about how you feel and documenting that kind of communication, and hopefully you would have a human resources representative that you could go to if maybe your supervisor wasn't as responsive as you would hope. But yeah, that's a really tough situation to be in, definitely. And I hope you don't have to have that again too.
Can I give a suggestion?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Oh, absolutely.
I've always found that going through the chain of command is your best resource. If you can't get it solved on the first, the first people that are above you, go above them and keep going till you get your point across. But I'm a very persistent person. I'm not one to be walked on.
Right.
I actually worked for a company that I was young. I worked at a factory, and I guess I was going too fast for the 50-year-old that was sitting next to me that just wanted to be there. And I ended up losing my job because we got in an argument. But I learned in time, because I got into management and all that, the difference between a valued employee and the ones that are just there to be there for job security. Unprofessional behavior, twirling your hair at the cash register instead of stocking, not doing your job. That's basically, but I don't recall any time of carrying myself inappropriately, but except when I went to the military. They put me down as a male and I was a female. So
Oh my.
yeah, that one was a trip.
All right,
I'm not.
guys, those are some good examples, and this was just meant to be a discussion, just to think about, not only the things that we do that we wish we would have done differently, but things that, situations that we've been that we've witnessed or that we've had to endure that were difficult and challenging. So and again, maintaining a positive attitude, and even when you don't want to, is your best course of action in all those kinds of situations, I think. I think next we're going to show you a video, but I don't necessarily think that we have time for that. So Daryl, do you want to just talk about why we were going to do that, soft skills, and why that's important? It was a teamwork video.
Right.
And you guys can access that video on the career development website. It's called Career Spots, but Daryl can kind of share with you what we were going for and why we were going to share that video with you, just to kind of wrap things up here so you can get to your next session.
Yeah, and we selected that simply because, again, the theme of it being teamwork and collaboration, which are, again, two highly sought after skills. Okay, I know it just sounds, kind of touchy feely right now, but honestly, during an interview, for sure, it's going to come up, especially now that we're working. It's very hard to collaborate in a virtual atmosphere. Okay, so you will need good examples of times when you worked on a team, and what was the project, and were you that guy in the slide who was sleeping while everybody else was working or doing a presentation. So it was just going to be also a good introduction to those career spot videos, which some of them are brand new. I haven't had a chance to watch all of them yet, but just go to our, the Ivy Tech public webpage, type in career development, and then you'll see a band of videos at the top. Okay, and you can watch. I mean, there's a video on almost every subject that is germane to career development or career services. So again, teamwork, collaboration. Make sure that you understand the concepts. And again, if you, how can I put this? If you do get an interview in the next couple of years or whatever, I'm sure that question is going to come up about how to work on a team.
Yes, definitely. And I think, I would not steer you to these videos if they were not worth your time. They're very short, 3 minutes, 4 minutes long, and they have great information, really good content about everything from resumes to career readiness and just all kinds of topics, interviewing. And I have no reason to plug them other than the fact that they have good information that I think would be useful to you. So if you've got some time one evening and you want to take a look at those, I think it would be well worth your time to do so. And teamwork, I think, is one of the things I was thinking about of something I've witnessed that kind of drove me crazy in an environment is when you go to a place and you expect customer service and someone keeps saying, oh, well, that's not my job. That's so-and-so. You have to go over here. You have to go over there. You have to go over here. Part of working as a team is learning to work together and to help people maybe outside of your, now, some things that involve a level of expertise are different, but just learning how to work as a team with a group of people so that you can provide really good customer service and make people think that they're important to you, or make them know that they're important to you when you're working with them, and that you're not just shoving them around and not helping. So any questions before we wrap up? I want to give you guys at least a couple minutes before your next session. I forgot you had one more. I said this was our last one at the beginning, and I was wrong. I apologize for that.
Well, it's the last professional development one. We're moving into vision boarding, which is like our happy hour, but it's still focused on the self. So, and I dropped that link in the chat, but I can do it again.
So we were just a warm up for Nina. Is that how we're looking at it?
Yeah.
All right.
So a question to Daryl and Jamie. Have you ever gone into an interview and you felt like you've not really aced it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think everyone has. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody on an earlier presentation talked about how interviews are just nerve-wracking. Okay. So, and I have walked out of interviews where I thought, man, I got this job. I aced it. I cannot wait to, for them to offer me the salary I think I should make. Never heard back from them. So here's the point. Your career development CCEC office will do mock interviews with you. So take advantage of that service, because the more you do it, the more kinks you can work out, the better you'll be.